Welcome to Buckets. It's Action Network's basketball betting podcast presented by FanDuel. I'm your host, Maria Marino, joined once again by Action Network writer Jim Turvey at Turvey Bets. Jim, what's going on?
Not too much, but I think we have to lead off with an important episode of Buckets Day. This is birthday buckets for our great host here, Maria Marino. Happy birthday.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad you just got it out there in the open, because if you didn't say it, I was just going to have to be like, listen, it's my birthday. We're going to party like it's my birthday. So that being said, I was actually curious about this before we get into tonight's slate. There's two games on Ion. Like, this is more of a betting culture question, but you're more of an avid bettor than I am. Like, do you ever do any birthday related betting?
Well, okay, so I think you have to do a birthday parlay. They both end
Okay.
in Y. It kind of sounds similar. You know me, I'm not the biggest parlay guy, but
Yes.
parlays are fun. Birthdays are fun. So let's have a little fun. I think so. I think you have to do a parlay. I think I think the rule should be you only root for your team, which, spoiler alert here, I might be giving advice towards the opposite of your team. So you might have to ignore me today.
Yes.
I don't know.
Fine.
Is there anything else that you think would be like a fun birthday gift or
Well,
betting related
look, just so
topic?
you know, just to be clear, I'm not fishing for gifts or anything, but I do like the idea of a parlay, because I feel like, sometimes when it's your birthday, you get a lottery ticket or someone gives you a lottery ticket. And that's kind of like what a parlay is. And
Exactly.
it's just like a fun, you know, um, hopefully like low risk, high reward type scenario. And yes, spoiler, if you couldn't tell already, throughout the weeks of doing this podcast, I am technically a Liberty fan. Try not to let it affect my analysis, though. But that being said, we have the Liberty back in action tonight. And this is actually their first game since they thumped the Aces on Sunday. So they've had a nice little break here, which is much needed, because they went through a really tough stretch of their schedule, probably the toughest of their season. And included in there was that back-to-back, which was a reschedule with the Lynx from earlier in the year. They ended up dropping that game. So I think they're going to be rested. They are still at home, but the spread is big. So Liberty are favored at last check on FanDuel by 13.5. This is an 8 p.m. Eastern tip, by the way. And I was just curious. So I looked this up, how they are against the spread when the spread is double digits. Overall this season, they're 12-16 ATS and 4-8 ATS with a double digit spread. So we've kind of known this, right? Like, we've kind of been talking about this throughout the season. They're, for the most part, winning the games they should, but they occasionally lose games that they shouldn't. And they occasionally have games that are too close for comfort when they shouldn't be. So with that as sort of the backdrop, what do you feel like this game is going to bring?
Yeah, well, you set it up perfectly. In fact, you used some of the numbers I was going to use as well, because it is with this Liberty team. I mean, it's 22-6. They're having a very good season, but they are the second worst, tied for the second worst team against the spread this season. And I love that one you just referenced as double digit favorites, because I hadn't even dug that deep into it. But that's exactly kind of what we're looking at is, so if we pick that out, they're 8-8 against the spread, normal when they're not double digit faves. The real drop off is when they get to that double digit number, and this is one of those cases. And it's part of why I'm on this guy today, and it's partially that, and the Sky are actually tied for the best team against the spread this season. They're 16-12 against the spread. But it's also very much part that this is a really good matchup for the Sky as well, actually. These two played a couple times back-to-back earlier in the season. One was a very close loss for Sky, and then they actually came to New York and they won the next night. I think why they match up well with the Liberty is they do a very good job of holding teams from taking threes and from shooting well from three. And that's such a big part of Sandy Rondello's offense here with the Liberty. They take, I believe, the most threes per game and hit, at last I checked, like second highest percentage. So this is a team that's very reliant on points from beyond the arc, and the Sky are really good at taking that away. technically last time they matched up, it was under James Wade. So we do have a new coach here, and I'm actually going to touch on that when we get to the total a little bit. But this is still that's still been a point of emphasis for this Sky team, and I think it's why they match up well with Liberty here. So I think if last I saw, I believe, did you say 13.5 at FanDuel?
Yeah, that's what I just saw. Yep.
Yeah, that's a big number. I would take that down to about 11.5. For me, the number is about, maybe a point high, but the matchup is actually where I'm really, really looking at here to be on the Sky side of this. I wanted to touch a little bit on the total, but I don't know if you have any other thoughts on the spread.
Yeah, well, let's get into the total, but first, just to sort of pile on to what you were saying, I do think 13.5 feels high for a Sky team that in general is surging, in general has been playing a lot better of late. They had sort of a letdown game against the Lynx in their last time out, which was a loss. But prior to that, 3 straight wins scoring 100 plus points. And I talked about this earlier in the week. That's not easy to do. Like they have scorers that can really get hot. And I think Kalia Copper specifically is like to that point in the season where she is just like, F it, I am going hard. Like she's just playing for so much pride right now, because I feel like this season has just been a mess for the most part for the Sky. And so I do think they're a little better, they're better than their record indicates right now. And they have the ability to, I think, just cause some trouble for some teams. And on the Liberty side, I mentioned they should be fairly rested. One thing that is exciting is they're going to be getting Stephanie Dolson back. I don't know if that's going to be much of a factor tonight. She will likely be on a minutes restriction. But I think I've said throughout the season, I think having her off the floor has impacted them more, more than meets the eye. And I think getting her back at this juncture and hopefully ramping her up before postseason is going to be extremely important. But for tonight, I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. But I do like, I'm not comfortable laying, 13.5 points right now. Even though I do like the Liberty to, in front of their home crowd, which they had the biggest attendance for a WNBA game on Sunday at Barclays Center. Like I think it'd be crazy if they like drop this one, but I could definitely see a close game.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the home court advantage, because both teams have been kind of neutral on the two, and that's another reason we always bake in about 3 points for home court advantage, but the Sky have been just as good on the road, and the Liberty have actually been even a little bit better on the road. So it is wild to think about, because I've been to those Barclays crowds. Yeah. It's a great crowd.
Yeah.
There must be something in New York water. The Knicks always struggle at home too. So I don't know. It's maybe the high pressure. They can kind of feel it from the fans or something.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I have always been, in general, especially with a New York team, which is, typically can be a harsh crowd across the board in sports. Like I always say that sometimes home court is not an advantage. I think that with the Knicks all the time, just because with the Knicks, they haven't won in so long. There's so much pressure. The fans are so critical. The media is so critical. And also, right, when you're home, you got people like asking you for tickets, who's coming to the game,
yep.
Which I know the Liberty experienced that quite a bit this past Sunday with the Aces. And thankfully for them, it didn't matter because they dominated. But they also, you brought up the 3-point shot, and we know Sab is kind of the catalyst for it, but I mean, they shot almost 45% from 3. So as long as the shots are falling, everything's dandy, right? Everything's dandy. So on an off shooting night, you never know. But we've rambled a bit on this.
Can I hop back in just briefly?
Yes, because I want you to talk about I want you to talk about the total.
Yeah, perfect. That's why I was going to go as well. And you actually touched on this really well in a few minutes back when you were talking about the Sky offense. You mentioned, the 3 straight games over 100. So I wanted to point out, so they lost James Wade about halfway through the season. So they've now played 12 games under their new coach here. And under Wnba, they have an offensive rating of 105.1. So let's compare that to James Wade. It was 97. So that's a huge jump. If you look at the numbers, it's not really any one specific category. It's kind of they're, taking a few more threes. They're shooting a little bit better. They're turning over a little less. It's a little bit, it's all incremental changes that have added up to a much better offense. Now, ironically, their defensive rating has dropped. So under Wade, it was 100.9. Under Vattensever, it's 108.4. So both of those skew to just much higher scoring games. The Liberty as well, they've been increasing their pace as the season goes along, and they've been scoring a little bit more. Their discrepancy is not nearly to the level of the Sky, but they've also been scoring a little bit more of late. So this is one where I really like the over in this game, and it's already taken a little bit of money. It started, I think, maybe 166, but I would play this up to right around 170. So I think hopefully there'll be still some wiggle room when people hear this as well. So
sounds like it's going to be an exciting night at Barclays Center. Hopefully lots of scoring and a good game. So there we go. And the good thing is there's only 2 games on the slate. So it doesn't matter that we kind of, we went a little long on that game.
I'm gonna hold this one more second on that. I have one last one that again bounces off of something you said. You mentioned Kalia Copper. She's been awesome. She has under the new head coach, she's averaging 23 points a game. They're still hanging her line at 19.5 though. So especially in a game that I see being pretty high scoring here, you can get her over 19.5, slightly juiced, but over 19.5 at FanDuel as well. So that's going to be one that I'm looking to bet as well.
Ooh, that is definitely one I will consider for the parlay.
Oh yeah, there you go. Perfect.
We'll see how that works out. All right, so the other game on the slate, Mystics at Aces, 10 Eastern. Not nearly as interesting a matchup, I would say. And, it sucks. It sucks. Like before the season, I was pretty high on the Mystics, and I think I had pretty sound logic. But when half your team is injured for like the entire season, it's not going to bode well for you. And the Mystics injury report is still looking bleak. So, all the same names, all the big names continue to be out. And and then on the other side, you have the Aces, and they are 18.5 point favorites. So it went up a point like just before we came on this pod. So people are definitely hammering the Aces, I would think. And so I looked at the Aces record ATS as well as a double-digit favorite, kind of to be able to juxtapose them with the Liberty, because there really isn't a comparison. I mean, so the Aces are 16-12 ATS. So I guess that's tied for the best team ATS with the Sky that you mentioned earlier. 13-9 against the spread as a double-digit favorite. Which is incredible. And we've known it. We've known that they've been, for the most part, putting away opponents. So in that way, they've been a lot more dominant a team than anyone else in the league. And the Mystics have lost 5 of 6.
Well, and I love that you looked that up, the 2 double digit, because it is such a good breakdown of why we feel like the Aces are so incredible, and the Liberty, there's still something missing, even though obviously Sunday was about the exact opposite of that. So, but overarchingly for the season, that's how it has felt. And I think it's interesting because I would love to see of that breakdown too, like the home road, because I think part of it is they're more likely to be a double-digit favorite at home, and they've been outstanding at home this season. And that's part of why, if I had to lean either direction, I would lean towards the Aces. I'm going to stick away from spread. 18.5. Yeah, it's a massive number. The ability to get backdoored on 18.5 is through the roof. So I'm probably not going to be looking at the spread here as much. But so we talked about Aces at home. The other one that I've heard on this podcast many times before, Aces first half. The Mystics at the start of the season were one of the best first half teams. If you look at the overall net ratings for first halves for this season, the Mystics they're plus 11.1, third best in the league. They look outstanding. If you dig a little bit deeper, since they've started losing players left and right, we've had these big 3 out for over a month now. In the last month, they're actually a negative net rating in the first half, minus 1.7. So This is a place where, the Aces, their net rating in the first half is comical. It's like plus 26.4, I believe. And
Comical. I
if it's
love that word choice.
it really is. Like, what else can you do? Every game they're up, like a dozen at the half. So I'm going to be targeting this first half here. Even though the Mystics, if you look at them for the season, they look like a great first half team, but that's actually, mostly from how they started the season versus what this squad actually is right now. The only other look I have, honestly, I kind of lean towards the over here.
Yes.
But that scares me a little bit, with like the potential for a blowout.
Yes, exactly.
So I might do a first half over as well. But then there's one player prop that caught my eye, and this is a lean. The Copper is probably a full play at the number it is right now. Wilson's probably more of a lean here. Her to go over 9.5 rebounds. Since Candace Parker has gone out, she's taken over more of the rebounding load. So she's averaging 10.2 per game, which again, not demonstrably higher than 9.5. So we're not going to hammer it, but she's cleared it in 6 of 10. And I think this will be a game that, this Mystics team without their bigs, they're playing a little quicker. I think it should have a decent pace to it. The biggest worry again is, a blowout potential, and she doesn't have to play the last 6 minutes and you're sitting right at 9 rebounds or something like that. So it's a lean, not a hammer, but I think this, honestly, this game, the Mystics have of late, they're really looking like those injuries are wearing on them. I think you see it both in the production of Sykes and Cloud, and also some of the frustration boiling over in recent games.
Indeed.
It's got to be frustrating to have 3 starters out for a big chunk of the season. I'm a little bummed too, because they were traveling on this West Coast trip. I thought we might get some people back.
Yeah.
EDD was doubtful last game, and now she's just fully out. So I don't know if there's maybe a setback there, but I'm with you in being bummed for the Mystics in general for their futures, because this was a team I was on as well.
Right. And, I'm really bummed. You brought up Brittany Sykes, and I think she has been playing great. And this is she was definitely an underrated free agent signing. And, before all these injuries hit, I mean, they were very solid. And I thought she was fitting in really nicely. And you can just tell she's a very passionate, emotional player. She's extremely competitive. And this is just kind of like, to your point, it's demoralizing when you're going out there night in and night out and like laying it all on the line, and you're shorthanded, your team's shorthanded. So that is a little bit of a bummer, but once again, I mean, Aces first half, you're right. We've talked about it quite a bit on this pod, and it just seems like the more comfortable play, especially when there's a really big spread. And, in second halves of those types of games, so many variables can sort of take hold. So I like it. I'm going to have to, stew a little bit on what I might want to do for my little B-Day parlay. But this was a good way to get the birthday started. So I thank you, Jim Turvey, for joining us once again here on Buckets.
I'm honored to be the birthday guest. I think this has to mean I'm probably the top Buckets guest. I assume that this was all laid out years in advance that I would be. I said
to myself, who is going to make sure I get the birthday started off right? Let me call Jim. So thanks for everyone out there for listening to Birthday Buckets. We are presented by FanDuel. Make sure you also, if you haven't already, download the award-winning Action app. It's so helpful. You can also rate and review this podcast to potentially win Action swag or a free subscription to Action Pro, or just like say happy birthday to me, whatever. Jim, thanks again, and let's get buckets.